So I wanted to just post my discussion on Teach Like a Pirate. Look, overall, once I saw the video, I was like, okay, this is going to be like a really good book. But I was also like super worried because he talks about it in one of the things about like when you reach a certain level of like expertise, like that it starts to become to look easy, and other people sort of like that's kind of the hindrance or the backfall of like being really good at what you're doing and giving it your 100%, is that other people will just assume that it comes easy for you when actually it's like it's work. And so when he was doing his presentation with the TED Talk and doing like the numbers thing, and even reading through this book, so like there was definitely a time where I was like, oh yeah, of course it's, of course he can do, be like a pirate and have his acronyms and stuff like that and his mnemonic codes, because he's been doing it for 16 years, so it's kind of become easy. And then reading through the book and also like the 6 words definitely kind of brought some stuff up for me. I think one of them with passion was, it was like, here's a secret: we are not passionate about everything we teach. I didn't think that was going to be the secret that he was going to talk about, because that, I don't know, that's necessarily something that I worry about. I mean, I know that there's going to be subjects that like you don't like so much, but I think learning in general is awesome. But what I thought was like, the worry of like, will I be an effective teacher? But I also like, this wasn't just a book about like, oh, this is, just you as a teacher, and then like all you have to focus on 100% of the time is like being a teacher, and it should consume you and everything you do. But he talks about it in the passion section of the Pirate acronym, that you have to have personal passions, because it makes you a more balanced person and therefore a more balanced teacher. And resist any movement that attempts to clone teachers and lessons, and instead rejoice in the fact that it is your individuality and uniqueness that will always lead you to become the most effective teacher that you can be. And that's something that I really kind of wanted to like frame up and put somewhere, because for me, I worry about what, if I'm doing the right thing and if I should just copy someone who's successful, and kind of remembering that it is the uniqueness that kind of makes you an effective teacher. Like, we don't have to all be cookie cutter. And he talks it in about towards the end when he talks about collaborations versus calibration, I think is what he says. Sorry if I jump around a lot, but I want to make sure I got that title right. It's great to get other teachers' insights and like view other things that are happening, but not at the cost of like that there's just right way of teaching. Because I feel like a lot of times it's sort of like there's just this one magical way, and that's definitely not the case. I do like that when he talks about being a pirate, like it's like when he gets through the acronym being a pirate, it's then, who's the crew that you surround yourself with? Like, you can't be a pirate unto yourself, or like an island unto yourself. Like, a pirate has a crew. They have support. They have people who come alongside them, that they can, that help them, that they learn from. Like, and I think the chapter is finding a crew. He talks about like the different styles and like not trying to bog yourself down by like the labels, like, oh, I just teach kinesthetically, or I teach auditorily, or I tech is everything, and instead kind of melding everything together and not sort of just being conglomerated into these houses, which I think is really cool, because like thinking of like our presentations that are coming up with like Odyssey of the Mind, problem solving, the project approach, not to get only locked down on like this is the one train of thought and this is like the perfect way to teach. Teaching is about bringing different ideas together to make the best safe, creative environment for your students to thrive and learn in. And that can change depending on the group that you have, like students or individuals, and they change and they're different. So getting locked into like this is the style kind of negates that. And so he does the Bruce Lee quote, that sometimes labeling and declaring a style places limits on your growth. He was fearful that his followers would do this to Jeet Kune Do and constantly admonish them to not be concerned with the name. So I think that's kind of, I think a lot of times you're just like, oh, this is the style, like this has to have something. I think if you're an effective teacher, that's kind of what's more important. So with immersion, I really loved the line when he's teaching you, he isn't doing anything else. I forget where it said, like, there really isn't any, like, what we consider multitasking. It's just how quickly you can move from one task to another, because if you are trying to split your attention between two tasks, it's just not done. You're not giving your 100% to two tasks. Like, that's just not possible. You're flittering from one to the other, and multitasking is just the illusion of how quickly you do that, so it seems like you're doing it at the same time. But there is no real multitasking. If you try to multitask, there's a loss of quality in what you're doing. And so, especially in teaching, if you haven't set the foundation where you're, teaching, but you're also like trying to talk to the person that came in, and kind of even your students having divided attention, like being focused, being immersed in the content that you're doing is what makes it more effective. Rapport, I don't think enough people talk about rapport. I think a lot of times, especially, and I didn't really, but I think a big thing that I know I haven't heard of necessarily in my elementary classes coming up is that rapport. And what I usually hear through is, when it comes to my literature class, is like you have to get to know your student in order to recommend books for them. So and like building rapport is essential because it builds trust, and that's how they're going to be willing to kind of do more outrageous things. And I've definitely been in, but I thought it was good. But I think part of building rapport and building trust is also like listening and like hearing them, and not just, kind of going through, like, writes a letter from like a student in his class, kind of a faux letter writing experience, to see like how he would want them to react or interact with this class. Ask and analyze. This one, so it kind of talks through asking yourself questions. So I'm a big worrier, so I ask a lot of things, and I overanalyze a lot. But even with my overanalyzation, I definitely have never asked that question of, how can I make this lesson happen outside? How can I, kind of engage through it? I'm sort of just worried about, like, okay, does this match this content area? Is this standard? And did I incorporate like the arts? And did I, like, how many standards did I put in to this? And did I meet my ESOL standards? And check boxes, perfect, let's go, let's keep it rolling. Which I love the way he told the story, and the way that he explained how he was messing with the reader, which I thought was wonderful, because it was very much like modeling a behavior and activity, which is a great teaching technique, but it makes it stick with your mind of, you tease and then you kind of come back, and the fact like that's a choice, that's a performance choice. And then the phrase like, it's easy for you, you're creative. I think for me, I don't know that I've ever told someone like, it's easier for you, it's creative. I've probably felt it at some point, like, oh, it's easy for you. I don't know that I've said it's easy for you because you're creative. Usually my thought process is, it's easy for you, you've done it for so long. Like, he was like 16 years, like, oh, you've done this for 16 years. Of course it comes easy to you. Or more naturally to you now. You've been doing it for 16 years. But to hear him kind of break down the fact that like there's still lessons that don't go well after 16 years of teaching, to me is kind of like eye-opening, like that's a cop-out. And so I really thought that this was kind of that like chapter that like made me think more technically about the way that I think about the words that I'm using. Because I say a lot like, oh, I'm not a creative person. And I've had a lot of people be like, no, you're a creative person. That's not like a real statement. And really what it is, it's a cop-out. It's me kind of like, set your standards low. So I'd feel less intimidated, and it's really just a scapegoat. So this was a big chapter for me that had me like thinking a lot. And I'm going to keep skipping because it's becoming a 20. I know I had something in here. This is where the letter comes in transformation, and I thought that was awesome thing to do. I did mark some books that he put, Creating by Robert Fitz, and kind of that having that vision and being purposeful of, like, if your students didn't have to be there, would you be teaching to an empty room? And I think it's that, like, you affect your students in a very profound way, and like, you are important. I feel like sometimes I feel like with the teaching profession, it's sort of like, I was doing summer camp, and this little kid said, like, they're like, oh, what do you think will happen in the future? And they'll be like, teachers will be robots. Like we don't want humans to teach anymore. And I was like, oh, that hurts my heart. And I think sometimes that's a mentality we think is real, but at the end of the day, like, that's it's like teaching to an empty room. Like, if they don't have to be there, if they could get this information from somewhere else. So to make your presence an effective presence, I think, is kind of what that means. Enthusiasm, which was the last thing. I also like that he talked about the fact that he sandwiched passion and ended it with enthusiasm. But the quote that I super liked in here was, there's nothing more contagious on the planet than enthusiasm. The songs become incidental. What people receive is your joy. And I think that, again, kind of speaks to, you control your classroom. Your enthusiasm controls your classroom. If you're like, this is awesome, this is amazing, this is great, then you're going to feel like, this is awesome, this is amazing, this is... And that's one of the things that I marked there. When he talked about crafting an engaging lesson, which, again, I don't feel like is a big thing that is kind of taught, like the presentation and, like, hooks and transitions, which is why sometimes I feel like my style can get choppy. Like, you can get choppy and my style can get choppy. The Trail of Tears and setting like artifacts up along the way, and then just like having his students walk like a mock trail of tears. And it teaches, like, you're teaching the same content, the same concept, the same standard, but in such a different way. And I think Long Live the Arts chapter. This is the second time I've seen the Pablo Picasso quote. It was also in Integrating Arts. It's, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain the artist once he grows up. And I think that we kind of kill the creativity a little bit. But overall, I thought it was an amazing book, as I try not to go over the 25-minute mark. It's the longest advocation for a book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was a little worried that I was not going to be able to incorporate anything, because I was very